Princeton and Rutgers did it first. Lafayette and Lehigh have done it more times. Yale and Harvard were the pioneers, and they call it the game. So do California and Stanford. Texas and Oklahoma have a shootout. With Clemson and Georgia, it's simply a war. But nowhere in the hallowed annals of this game called football has there been a rivalry to match the one that Michigan and Ohio State rekindled on the final Saturday of the autumn season. It is magic and it is madness. It's a battle of bands, Ohio State's brass blaring out the Buckeye battle cry, the men and women of Michigan responding with "Hail to the victors." It's a battle of endurance, of wills, of coaching legends. Just say Bo or Woody, and you need not give their last names. Every player who ever played in this epic struggle is quickly made to understand the staggering importance of it all. And once they have experienced it, they tell you the same thing. Never have I seen such intensity, nor felt such hitting. Almost without exception, despite the enormity of the prize, these battles have been contested without incident. By and large, they have been duels between the titans of the Big Ten, who, the white-hot rivalry notwithstanding, have great respect for each other. They scrap violently, they settle matters, they shake hands, and wait till next year. And come next year, chances are good that these two great universities will be matching wit and will, stamina and emotion for the thing each treasures most, the Big Ten football championship and the trip to the Rose Bowl. They first played in 1897, and America had come through the Great War before Ohio State ever beat Michigan for the first time. Since then, though, it's practically a dead heat. The nation was mired in what we now call the last good war, when the Ohio State-Michigan game first determined which team would capture the conference championship. It was 1944. And 6 of the nation's top 10 teams were service teams. In fact, Ohio State's coach, the legendary Paul Brown, had been summoned to coach Great Lakes Navy, and the Ohio State job fell to one of his aides, Carroll Widows. Widows led Ohio State's 1944 team to a perfect season, and only Michigan's team could come within 2 touchdowns of the Buckeyes. There were 4 All-Americans on that Buckeye team: Jack Duggar, Bill Willis, Bill Hackett, and halfback Les Horvath, who won the first of 5 Ohio State Heisman trophies. The 18-14 loss was but the second of the season for Michigan, and would mark only the second time in 10 tries a Fritz Chrysler-coached team would lose to Ohio State. You might say that game back in 1944 served as an omen for future times, when you note that Ohio State tried only 4 passes that day, Michigan only 7. Michigan completed but 1, the Buckeyes none. The Wolverines turned the ball over 4 times. In the deathless prose common to that day, a chronicler of the event called it one of the most supremely inspiring feats in all scarlet and gray annals. Ohio State hoped for a trip to the Rose Bowl, but because of wartime travel restrictions, 2 West Coast teams were invited to play that New Year's Day. Ironically, Carroll Widows would walk away from the Ohio State job after the 1945 season, even though the Buckeyes lost only 2 games that year, 1 to Michigan. Wes Fessler was a 3-time All-American as a player at Ohio State in the late 20s, and he came back to coach his alma mater 20 seasons later, had a winning record, but could not beat Michigan in 4 tries, and that's why he was let go. Fessler's firing opened the way for a coaching legend, Woody Hayes. But in 1949, the 7-7 tie Fessler managed with Michigan propelled the Buckeyes into the Rose Bowl for only the second time. Players who have prominent places in Big Ten football lore dotted the lineups that day. Janowitz, who later would win Ohio State's second Heisman Trophy, Morrison, and for Michigan, Ortman, Kempthorne, and Dufbeck. Michigan led 7-0 with 8 minutes to play, and Ohio State completed an 80-yard drive in just 6 plays. An offense dormant most of the drab, sleety afternoon suddenly coming to life for one spirited spurt. Still, it took Ohio State 2 tries at the conversion to earn the tie. Jimmy Haig's placement was wide, but an offsides penalty against the Wolverines gave the Buckeyes new life. And this time, Haig's kick was perfect. Ohio State won the Rose Bowl game, too, beating Southern Cal 17-14. For as long as folks gather to talk about the unforgettable moments in football, they will hearken back to that last Saturday in November of 1950, to the Michigan-Ohio State game that will forever be called the Snow Bowl. On the eve of the game, the awfulest snow and ice storm since 1913 literally paralyzed the Midwest. Temperatures plunged to record lows. It was the kind of weather, one said, that would make sled dogs go on strike. But the game would go on. The two teams punted 45 times, 10 times on first down. Ohio State had the only 3 first downs of the game. Amazingly, though, there were but 4 turnovers. But perhaps the most amazing statistic is that out of the nearly 83,000 tickets sold, more than 50,000 people actually showed up in that huge gray horseshoe built alongside the Olentangy River in Columbus. By the time the game started, just 30 minutes late, the mercury was near zero. The snow was driven by brutal winds whipping in from the northwest, sometimes at 30 miles an hour. With the game just a few minutes old, Vic Janowitz gave Ohio State the lead with a field goal from the 28-yard line. It was set up when Ohio State blocked Chuck Ortman's punt, and Bob Momsen, one of 2 brothers playing on opposite sides, recovered at Michigan's 8-yard line. But Michigan blocked a Janowitz punt for a safety just 6 minutes later. The snow was coming down in such abundance that seeing the yard lines was quickly out of the question. From the press box, the goings-on below were little more than rumors. A modest man given to understatement, the then Wolverine coach, Ben Osterbahn, almost apologized for winning, saying it surely was no test of football skill. The other Momsen decided the issue that bleak day, breaking through to block Janowitz's punt and then recovering the ball in the end zone. Harry Alice's conversion made it 9-3, and that's the way it finished. With Northwestern upsetting heavily favored Illinois that day, a Michigan team that had won but 2 of its first 6 games that season sort of sneaked into the Rose Bowl and then won it. Woody Hayes would serve 28 seasons as coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes, but he was not an immediate hit. He had lost 2 of his first 3 to, as he put it, that team up north. But there was no stopping the Buckeyes of 1954. The game was Michigan's to win, marching downfield with the opening kickoff, a relentless drive that overpowered the Buckeyes and gave Michigan a 7-0 lead. But then a fumble inside Ohio's 40, a missed field goal, and a pickoff in Ohio territory set up the tying touchdown. It was a day of total frustration for Osterbahn's Wolverines. They had more of everything: first downs, rushing yardage, passing yardage, but fewer points. The Wolverines coughed up the ball at the Ohio 21, failed on 4 tries after having a first and goal at the Ohio State 4, and yielded another interception inside the enemy 30. Everyone agreed that Ohio's magnificent goal line stand had been the difference. Instead of going for an apparent tie, Michigan relinquished the football, then could not halt an Ohio State insurance drive that's often described as being 99 yards and 2 feet in length. The reward, though, a 2,500-mile trip to Pasadena. Woody's team would win that one, too. They'd been a Big Ten dark horse, these Buckeyes, and this 1954 season, capped off by a national championship, would ensure Coach Hayes' job security and keep the Wolves, if not the Wolverines, at bay for years to come. No one seems to know who first came up with the 3 yards and a cloud of dust description for Ohio State's offense during Woody Hayes' early years. But if the idea ever needed reinforcement, that came in 1955. The Buckeyes quarterback, Frank Elwood, threw 23 passes all season long and completed 9 of them. Woody's ace receiver in 1955, Paul Michael. He caught 4. For 57 minutes and 45 seconds that November day in 1955, Ohio State and Michigan played football. Ohio State was clearly the dominant team, shutting out the Wolverines 17-0. Michigan restricted to just 109 yards all day long, and nearly that much in penalties. And the developments in the waning moments did not bring honor to either school, either team. 10 penalties called in the last 2 minutes, 15 seconds. It was, frankly put, foul play. The loss depriving Michigan of a trip to the Rose Bowl, awarded instead to another bitter rival, Michigan State. No one ever owns up to it, but the truth of the matter is this. At Ohio State, you're expected to beat Michigan. At Michigan, you're expected to beat Ohio State and Michigan State. If you don't do that with some regularity, people look at you funny, or not at all. Bump Elliott's difficulty as Michigan's coach was that in 10 seasons, he was able to accumulate just 5 victories over the Wolverines' arch-rivals. The only year he beat them both, 1964, and it was the 10-0 achievement on the frozen tundra that was Ohio Stadium on November 21st that sent Michigan to the Rose Bowl. That season, 1 point, a 21-20 loss to Purdue, deprived the Wolverines of an opportunity to gain the national championship. It was another brutal day, the temperature and the wind each at 20, as the giant heavyweights gathered. Artistically, it was not a pretty sight, more of a punting duel than anything else, 15 of them. Michigan with only 160 yards gained all day, Ohio State with just 180. Ohio State could have seized the advantage in the first half when Michigan nudged into the Buckeye territory just once, but the Buckeyes missed a field goal. Then, in the final moment of the first half, Ohio State fumbles a punt. Michigan recovers at the Buckeye 20 and makes the game's only touchdown. As Woody cringed on the sidelines, his team relinquished the ball 3 times on turnovers in the second half, did it twice inside Michigan's 30. Curiously, they were Buckeyes who beat the Buckeyes that bitter afternoon. John Henderson recovered the fumble that led to the touchdown. Bob Timberlake threw the touchdown pass, and Jim Detweiler caught it. Timberlake kicked the conversion, and Rich Volk had the dandy punt return that set up Timberlake's field goal. And it was Volk who intercepted 2 passes that blunted Ohio drives deep in Michigan territory. And get this, Henderson, Timberlake, Detweiler, and Volk, Ohio native sons. Bump Elliott's team walloped Oregon State in the Rose Bowl, and on the West Coast they were screaming for an end to the Rose Bowl agreement. You see, back then, West Coast teams had won only 4 times in 19 Rose Bowl games. In 1968, Michigan went into the showdown game ranked 4th in the land. The Wolverines had won 8 straight after a season-opening loss to California. No one had whipped the Buckeyes, who were ranked 2nd. Ohio State had Kern, Otis, Brockington, Tatum. Michigan had Johnson, Mandich, Deardorff, all of them players of remarkable skill. And for nearly 3 quarters, these 2 teams played evenly. As for the rest of it, it was a deterioration on the field and off. Woody said it took 50 points to satisfy him. He got 50, then in the last 83 seconds tried to make it 52, but the pass for the two-point conversion was overthrown. Final score, Ohio State 50, Michigan 14. A Columbus newspaper writer called this a glorious triumph. A headline writer in Detroit called it a mauling. Bump Elliott, named associate athletic director just weeks later, declined to criticize his coaching rival.
We will begin the scrimmage with the first defense up first, ready to take on a power attack.
Enter Glenn E. Call Me Bo Schembechler, an Ohio product. Learned his coaching under Woody Hayes. Came from Miami, the place they call the cradle of coaches, nestled in the southwestern corner of Ohio, where he was coached by Woody Hayes.
All right, second offense and first defense down there.
Schembechler's first year baptism in 1969 had included a one-sided loss to Missouri and a stinging defeat by Michigan State. And no one gave Bo's new team much of a chance against Ohio State. And why should they? This was an Ohio State team that had won 22 straight games. TCU, Washington, Michigan State, Minnesota, Illinois, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Purdue. They had tumbled like 10 pins. No one had come within 4 touchdowns of the Buckeye team being described as one of the greatest college teams of all time. You don't get many great days in late November, either in Columbus or in Ann Arbor. And on this day, the Michigan skies were leaden. 103,588, a record crowd at the time, withstanding the gray chill. Only the national television audience was warm. Some men dare to dream great things, but could Bo Schembechler, rookie disciple of the grizzled jowly master, have dared dream about such an occurrence? For Hayes, the day was a nightmare. His team taking the lead as expected, losing it, taking it again as expected, then losing it for good. 6 interceptions for the opportunistic Wolverines this day, 4 of them inside their own 30-yard line. When it all was over, Michigan had upset Ohio State 24-12. For years, Woody Hayes would recall that bleak afternoon as one of the most disheartening of his illustrious career. For Schembechler, it was only the first of his 21 encounters against Ohio State. He would win 10 more times before he called it quits, and he'd wind up with a 1-victory edge over his old master. It's been said that revenge is sweet, particularly if you don't have to wait very long for it. Woody didn't. The very next year, 1970, the atonement for the loss to Michigan in Bo's first season came about because Ohio State simply shut down Michigan's running game all day long, only 37 yards on the ground for an attack that up to then had been getting 274 yards a game. After the 20-9 victory in 1970, Woody said beating Michigan, not the Rose Bowl prize, was the thrust of his pregame message for his players. Incidentally, Ohio State lost that Rose Bowl game. At about that time, the Wolverines and the Buckeyes had begun a string of Rose Bowl reversals, losing 10 out of 11 in one stretch, and there was no more talk from the West Coast about canceling the series. In 1972 at Columbus, the Wolverines won every statistic except the one that really counts, the score, losing 14-11, mainly because of 2 gallant goal line stands. In the second quarter, it was Michigan with a 1st and goal at the Ohio 1, and in 4 plays, Michigan lost 1 yard. In the fourth quarter, it was 1st and goal from the Buckeye 5. And the Buckeyes took over at the 1-foot line. The second-guessers wondered why Bo disdained the field goal that would have meant a tie and a trip to the Rose Bowl. Like his mentor, Bo never cared much for ties. Besides, a victory likely would have brought the one thing he never got, a national championship. In 1973, these two great rivals would know neither victory nor defeat. The game wound up in a 10-all tie. But the conference athletic directors voted to send Ohio State to the Rose Bowl. It was reported that the vote was 6-4. Speculation had it that the directors picked Ohio State as a healthier team, perhaps more likely to win, since Michigan quarterback Dennis Franklin suffered a broken collarbone very late in the game. When he learned the vote went against his team, Bo called it the lowest point of his coaching career. But Ohio State did win the Rose Bowl game. In 1974, it was Ohio again prevailing 12-10, and the story was one of field goals made and missed. In football quarters, Czechoslovakian refugee Tom Klaben made certain he'll be remembered longer than Václav Havel. He kicked a record 4 field goals, total distance 160 yards for Ohio's points. Mike Lantry kicked 1 as Michigan built a 10-0 first-quarter lead. But Lantry, the Vietnam veteran who had missed 2 field goal attempts the previous showdown against Ohio, missed 2 more this time. The last one from the 23-yard line with but 18 seconds left to play. It was so close, Michigan fans still swear it was good. When again these two giants gathered in Ann Arbor, Woody Hayes would call it the greatest comeback, the greatest game I've ever coached. Ohio State went from early in the second quarter to midway in the final quarter without a first down. Michigan throttled 2-time Heisman winner Archie Griffin on just 46 yards. But another Griffin did end the Wolverines. The Buckeyes scored twice in the last 3 minutes, 18 seconds. First, an 80-yard drive, Woody surprising Michigan and delighting his fans with 3 pass completions. Then the lightning struck again. Ray Griffin, Archie's kid brother, returning an interception to the Michigan 3. Big Pete Johnson bowling into the end zone, Michigan's first home defeat in 42 games. One that sent the Wolverines to the Orange Bowl and Woody's team to the Rose Bowl for the 4th consecutive year. But that was the last touchdown a Woody Hayes team would ever score against a Bo Schembechler team. In the 1976 championship contest, Michigan would shut out Ohio State 22-0. Ideal football weather in Columbus and an ideal defensive scheme by Michigan limited Ohio State to 10 first down and 104 yards rushing. So dominant was Michigan that Ohio had the ball only 4 times in the second half. Michigan went back to basics. Didn't complete a pass, tried only 6 of them. But between them, Rob Lytle and Russell Davis carried the ball 53 times for Michigan. And can you ever figure out where Bo Schembechler learned that offense? Michigan had one conference defeat. Ohio State only a non-conference defeat going into the 1977 showdown in Ann Arbor. For Michigan, though, only a victory would suffice. It became an afternoon of squandered opportunities for the Buckeyes. 7 times they were deep in Michigan territory, 5 times inside the 15. And all they had to show for it in the end, a pair of field goals. Everything Michigan did, Ohio State did better, except holding on to the football. It was a fumble that set up Michigan's second touchdown. And it was a fumble that knocked the Buckeyes out of a 1st and goal situation in the last flickering moments. Michigan's 14-6 triumph sent the Wolverines to the Rose Bowl, Ohio State to the Sugar Bowl. It would be a long New Year's holiday for both. The 1978 season would be Woody's last, and against Michigan, the Scarlet and Gray faced the best defense in the land and lost the game 14-3. Ohio State just never got on track. Schembechler stunning Michigan fans and perhaps Ohio State by having Rick Leach pass the ball 22 times. He completed 11, 2 of them for touchdowns. This was Woody's third straight loss to Michigan, first time that ever happened to him. 5 weeks later, he'd bring his brilliant but tumultuous career to a crushing conclusion when he took a swing at a player during the Gator Bowl game against Clemson. Earl Bruce followed Hayes, and he won everything except the Rose Bowl in his first year. In 1980, he was 9-1 heading into the Michigan game. Bo's Michigan team had only a couple of non-conference losses and was coming off 3 straight shutout victories as game day arrived. Each of the Giants unbeaten and untied in the league, and the prize, the customary Big Ten crown and the trip to California. The game, in a word, dull. An exchange of field goals in the first half, then a third-quarter Michigan touchdown, the final 9-3 Michigan, and on to the Rose Bowl. For Earl Bruce, his first Big Ten setback, and the Ohio Stadium fans booed him for it. In 1986, Ohio won 9 in a row after 2 early non-conference losses. Michigan rolled over 9 foes before stumbling against Minnesota. So the setting in Columbus was the way fans thought it ought to be for the title and the Rose Bowl trip. Could it be we were all in the wrong stadium watching teams we just did not recognize? Who would believe these two teams threw a total of 56 passes and completed 34 of them? Who'd believe a game between Ohio and Michigan with only 6 punts and only 1 fumble? Furthermore, almost spring-like weather. It was odd from the outset. Michigan quarterback Jim Harbaugh guaranteeing a Wolverine victory and needing a missed Ohio field goal with 66 seconds left to make his dream come true. That victory would make Schembechler Michigan's winningest coach of all time. Woody died the following March. That fall, Ohio State fired Earl Bruce. Bo stepped aside after the 1989 season. You know, since 1944, 18 times Michigan and Ohio State had battled for the Big Ten championship and a trip to the Rose Bowl. The final record? Ohio State 8 victories, Michigan 8 victories, 2 games winding up in ties. For as long as young men play this game, and for as long as older men try to inspire them, we of course may remember the larger-than-life figures who have played in and coached in this dizzying spectacle that brings down the curtain on autumn. But more than that, though, the game is the thing. Michigan versus Ohio State. And that endures longer and shines brightest.